परम सुखे स्वीकार करो यथा शुद्ध भक्त चरण रेणु भजन अनुकूला भक्त सेवा परम सिद्धि प्रेमलति करो मूला Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Dust from the lotus feet of pure devotees is conducive to devotional service, while service to the Vaishnavas is itself the supreme perfection and the root of the tender creeper of divine love. I observe with great care the holy days like Ekadasi and Janmashtami, for they are the mother of devotion. As my dwelling place, I choose with the greatest of reverence and love the transcendental abode of Sri Krishna. All those places where my Lord Gaurasundar traveled for pastimes, I will visit in the company of loving devotees. My mind always begs for the opportunity to hear the music of the Mridanga. Upon hearing the kind of kirtan ordained by Lord Gaurachandra, my heart dances in ecstasy. By beholding the deity forms of the divine couple Sri Radha Krishna, I feel the greatest joy. By honoring the Lord's prasad, I conquer over all worldly illusions. Goloka Vrindavan appears in my home whenever I see the worship and service of Lord Hari going on there. Upon seeing the Ganges, which is a river of nectar emanating from the lotus feet of the Lord, my happiness knows no bounds. The sight of the holy Tulasi tree soothes my soul, for I know she gives pleasure to Lord Krishna. By honoring Sak, a dear favorite of Lord Chaitanya, I consider life worthwhile. Whatever Bhaktivinoda obtains that is conducive for the service to Sri Krishna, he accepts every day with the greatest of joy. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur ki jai. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Jasodanandana Vraja Janaranjana Jasodanandana Vraja Janaranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada. Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada. Jai Om Vishupad Paramahamsa Parivrajakacharya Ashtotala Sata Sri Srimati Svangres Esi Bhakti Vedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishupad Paramahamsa Parivrajakacharya Ashtotala Sata Sri Srimati Svangres Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnavrinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. प्रेम से को श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासदि गौर भक्त वृंद की जय। श्री श्री राधा कृष्ण गोप गोपीनाथ श्याम कुंद राधा कुंज गिरि गोवर्धन की जय। वृंदावन धाम की जय। मयपुर नवद्वीप धाम की जय। जगन्नाथपुरी धाम की जय। गंगा माई की जय। जमुना माई की जय। श्रीमती तुलसी देवी की जय। भक्ति देवी की जय। श्री हरिनाम संकीर्तन की जय। श्री श्री राधा मदन मोहन की जय। श्री श्री गौनिताई की जय। श्री श्री जगन्नाथ सुभद्रा बलदेव की जय। गौर प्रेमानंदी। All glories to the Samadhivatis. All glories to the Samadhivatis. All glories to the Samadhivatis. All glories to Sri Guru Sri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Prasabhutade Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pacharine Nirvisesha Sunyavadi Paschatya Devatarine. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudirayet Nashtapayeshu Abhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttamasloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki Krishnaya Vasudevaya Devaki Nandanaya Cha Nanda Gopa Kumaraya Govindaya Namo Namaha. Jaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Sri Sri Gaunitai ki Jai. Sri Sri Radha Madan Mohan ki Jai. Sri Sri Jagannath Subhadra Baladev ki Jai. Sri Sri Radha Damodar ki Jai. We are reading from Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita, Volume 3. Only he could lead them. 1967, Prabhupada is in San Francisco and goes to India. This is from the chapter entitled Swamiji Invites the Hippies. This is in San Francisco. After going to New York City for a few months, Srila Prabhupada goes to San Francisco. Of course, whether they would be able to persevere in Krishna consciousness despite the ever-present attractions of Maya would be seen in time. Some would fall, that was the human tendency, but some would not. At least, those who sincerely followed his instructions to chant Hare Krishna and avoid sinful activities would be successful. He gave the example that a person could say that today's fresh food, if not properly used, would spoil in a few days. But if it is fresh now, to say that in the future it will be misused and therefore spoil is only a surmise. Yes, in the future, anyone could fall down. But Prabhupada took it as his responsibility to engage his disciples now. And he was giving them the methods which, if followed, would protect them from ever falling down. Aside from Vedic standards, even by the standard of Swamiji's New York disciples, the devotees in San Francisco were not very strict. Some continued going to the donut shop, eating food without offering it to Krishna, and eating forbidden things like chocolate and commercial ice cream. Some even indulged in after kirtan cigarette breaks right outside the temple door. Some got initiated without knowing precisely what they had agreed to practice. Kirtanananda says, the mood in San Francisco was a lot more relaxed. The devotees liked to go to the corner and have their coffee and donuts. But Prabhupada loved the way so many people were coming. And he loved the program at the Avalon Ballroom. But there were two sides. Those who strictly followed the rules and regulations and emphasized purity, and then those who were not so concerned about strictness, but who wanted to spread Krishna consciousness as widely as possible. Swamiji was so great that he embraced both groups. Michael Wright, 21, had recently gotten out of the Marine Corps, and Nancy Grindle, 18, was fresh out of high school. They had met in college in Los Angeles. Feeling frustrated and in need of something tangible to which to dedicate their lives, they had come to San Francisco to join the hippies. But they soon realized that they and the Haight-Ashbury hippies, whom they found dirty, aimless, unproductive, and lost in their search for identity, had little in common. So Nancy took a job as a secretary for the telephone company, and Michael found work as a lineman for the electric company. Then they heard about the Swami in Haight-Ashbury and decided to visit the temple. It was an evening kirtan, and the irrepressible hippies were twirling, twisting, and wiggling. Michael and Nancy took a seat on the floor off to one side, impressed more by the presence of the Swami than by the kirtan. After the kirtan, Prabhupada lectured, but they found his accent heavy. They wanted to understand. They had an innate feeling that he was saying something valuable, and yet the secret seemed locked behind a thick accent and within a book written in another language. They decided to come back in the morning and try again. At the morning program, they found a smaller group, a dozen devotees with beads for chanting wrapped around their necks, a few street people. The kirtan seemed sweeter and more mellow, and Michael and Nancy chanted and danced along with the devotees. Then Prabhupada spoke, and this time they caught a few of his ideas. They stayed for breakfast and became friends with Mukunda and Janaki, Sam and Marjorie, now Shamsundar and Malati, Yamuna and Gurudas, and Govindadasi and Gurasundar. They liked the devotees and promised to come again that evening. Soon they were regularly attending the morning and evening programs, and Nancy, along with the other women, was attending Prabhupada's weekend cooking classes. Michael was open to Prabhupada's ideas, but he had difficulty accepting the necessity of surrendering to a spiritual authority. His tendency was to reject authorities. But the more he thought about it, the more he saw that Prabhupada was right. He had to accept an authority. He reasoned, every time I stop at a red light, I am accepting an authority. And finally, he concluded that the progress in spiritual understanding, he would have to accept a spiritual authority. Yet, because he didn't want to accept it, he was in a dilemma. Finally, after hearing Prabhupada's lectures for 2 weeks, Michael decided to surrender to Prabhupada's authority and try to become Krishna conscious. Michael says, Nancy and I decided to get married and become Swamiji's disciples and members of his society. We told some of the devotees, we would like to see Swamiji. They said, yes, just go up. He is on the 3rd floor. We were a little surprised that there were no formalities required. And when we got to the door, his servant, Ranchor, let us in. We went in with our shoes on. So Ranchor had to ask us to take them off. I didn't know exactly what to say to Swamiji. I was depending on my future wife to make the initial opening but then I finally said, we came because we would like to become members of your Krishna Conscious Society. He said, this was very nice. Then I said that actually the main reason we were there was that we wanted to be married. We knew that he performed marriage ceremonies and that it was part of the society's requirements that couples had to be duly married before they could live together. Swamiji asked me if I liked the philosophy and if I had a job. My answer to both questions was yes. He explained that, first of all, we would have to be initiated, and then we could be married the next month. At their initiation, Michael received the name Dayananda, and Nancy received the name Nandarani. Soon Prabhupada performed their marriage. Nandarani says, we knew it would be a very big wedding. In Haitajbury, whenever Swamiji would perform a wedding, hundreds of people would come, and the temple would be filled. My parents were coming, and Dayananda's parents were also coming. Swamiji said that it was proper that I cook. He said I should come to his apartment on the morning of the wedding, and he would help me cook something for the wedding feast. So that morning, I put on my best jeans and my best sweatshirts and my boots, and I went off to Swamiji's apartment. When I got upstairs, I walked in with my boots on. Swamiji was sitting there in his rocking chair. He smiled at me and said, "Oh, you have come to cook." I said, "Yes." He sat there and looked at me, one of those long silent stares. He said, "First, take off the boots." After I took off my boots and my old leather jacket, Swamiji got up and went into the kitchen. He got a very large pot that had been burnt so thick on the bottom that practically there was no metal visible. He handed it to me and said, "We want to boil milk in this pot. It has to be washed." There wasn't a sink in Swamiji's kitchen, only a teeny round basin. So I went into the bathroom, put the pot in the bathtub, and rinsed it out. I assumed Swamiji didn't want the black off the bottom because it was burnt on. So I brought it back to him, and he said, "Oh, that is very clean, but just take off this little black on the bottom here." I said, "Okay," and got a knife and crawled into the bathtub and started scrubbing the black off. I worked and worked and worked, and I scrubbed and scrubbed. I had cleanser up to my elbows, and I made a mess everywhere. I had gotten about half the black off. The rest seemed to be more or less an integral part of the bottom. So I took the pot back to Swamiji and said, "This is the best I can do. All of this is burnt on." He said, "Yes, yes, you've done a wonderful job. Now just take off this black that's left." So I went back to the bathroom, into the bathtub, and scrubbed and scrubbed and scrubbed. It was almost midday when I came out of the bathtub with all the black scrubbed off the bottom of that pot. He was so happy when I brought the pot in. It was sparkling. A big smile came on his face, and he said, "Oh, this is perfect." I was exhausted. Then Swamiji welcomed me into the kitchen and taught me how to make rasgullas. We boiled the milk, curdled it, and then I sat down and began rolling the curd into balls on a tray. As I rolled the balls, I would put them into a little row along the tray. And every single ball had to be exactly the same size. Swamiji would take his thumb and first and second fingers and shoot the balls out of the row when they were not the right size. And I would have to remake them until they were the right size. This went on until I had a full tray of balls, all the same size. Then Swamiji showed me how to boil the balls of curd in sugar water. Malati, Janaki, and I were cooking in the kitchen, and Swamiji was singing. At one point, Swamiji stopped singing and asked me, "Do you know what your name means?" I could not even remember what my name was. He had told me at initiation, but because none of us used our devotee names, I could not remember what mine was. I said, "No, Swamiji, what does my name mean?" He said, "It means you are the mother of Krishna." And he laughed loudly and went back to stirring the rasgullas. I could not understand who Krishna was, who in the world his mother would be, or how I was in any way related to her. But I was satisfied that Swamiji felt that I was somebody worth being. I finished cooking that afternoon about 4 o'clock. And then I went home to get dressed for the wedding. Although I had never worn anything but old dresses and jeans, Swamiji had suggested to the other ladies that they find a way to put me into a sari for the wedding. So we bought a piece of silk to use for a sari. I went to Malati's house. She was going to try to help me put it on. I could not keep it on, so she had to sew it on me. Then they decorated me with flowers and took me to Swamiji and showed him. He was very happy. He said, "This is the way our women should always look. No more jeans and dresses. They should always wear saris." Actually, I looked a fright. I kept stumbling, and they had to sew the clothes on me. But Swamiji thought it was very wonderful. The cloth was all one color. So Swamiji said, "Next time, you should buy cloth that has a little border on the bottom. So it's two colors. I like two colors better." When we went downstairs to the wedding, Swamiji met my relatives. He spoke to them very politely. My mother cried a lot during the ceremony. I was very satisfied that she had been blessed by meeting Swamiji. End of quote. Steve Bollert, age 20, born and raised in New York, and now living the hippie life in San Francisco, had read in the Oracle about Swami Bhaktivedanta's coming to San Francisco. The idea of meeting an Indian Swami had interested him, and responding to a notice he had seen posted on Hyde Street, he had gone along with Caroline Gold, the woman he was living with, to the airport to meet Swami Bhaktivedanta. He and Caroline had both gotten a blissful lift by chanting Hare Krishna and seeing Prabhupada, and they began regularly attending the lectures and kirtan at the temple. Steve decided he wanted to become like the Swami, so he and Caroline went together to see Prabhupada and request initiation. Speaking privately with Prabhupada in his room, they discussed obedience to the spiritual master and becoming vegetarian. When Prabhupada told them that they should either stop living together or get married, they said they would like to get married. An initiation date was set. Prabhupada asked Steve to shave his long hair and beard. "Why do you want me to shave my head?" Steve protested. Krishna had long hair, Rama had long hair, Lord Chaitanya had long hair, and Christ had long hair. Why should I shave my head? Prabhupada smiled and replied, "Because now you are following me." There was a print on the wall of Suradas, a Vaishnava. "You should shave your head like that," Prabhupada said, pointing to Suradas. "I don't think I'm ready to do that yet," Steve said. "All right, you are still a young man, there is still time, but at least you should shave your face clean and cut your hair like a man." On the morning of the initiation, Steve shaved off his beard and cut his hair around his ears so that it was short in front, but long in the back. "How is this?" he asked. "You should cut the back also," Prabhupada replied. Steve agreed. To Steve, Prabhupada gave the name Subal, and to Caroline the name Krishna Devi. A few days later, he performed their wedding. Since each ceremony was another occasion for kirtan and prasadam distribution, onlookers became attracted. And as the spiritual names and married couples increased with each ceremony, Prabhupada's spiritual family grew. The harmonious atmosphere was like that of a small, loving family, and Prabhupada dealt with his disciples intimately without the formalities of an institution or hierarchy. Disciples would approach him for various reasons, entering the little apartment to be alone with him as he sat on a mat before his makeshift desk in the morning sunlight. With men like Mukunda, Gurudas, and Shamsundar, Swamiji was a friend. With Janaki and Govinda Dasi, he was sometimes ready to be chided, almost like their naughty son, or he would be their grandfatherly teacher of cooking, the enforcer of the rules of kitchen cleanliness. And to all of them, he was the unfathomable pure devotee of Lord Krishna, who knew the conclusions of all the Vedic scriptures and who knew beyond all doubts the truth of transmigration. He could answer all questions. He could lead them beyond material life, beyond Haight-Ashbury hippiedom, and into the spiritual world with Krishna. It was 7 p.m. Srila Prabhupada entered the temple, dressed in a saffron dhoti, an old turtleneck jersey under a cardigan sweater, and a chadar around his shoulders. Walking to the dais in the rear of the room, he took his seat. The dais, a cushion atop a redwood plank 2 feet off the floor, was supported between two redwood columns. In front of the dais stood a cloth-covered lectern with a bucket of cut flowers on either side. Covering the wall behind the dais was a typical Indian madras with Haridas's crude painting of Lord Chaitanya in kirtan hanging against it. Srila Prabhupada picked up the kartals, wrapped the cloth straps around his four fingers, and looked out at his young followers sitting cross-legged on the burgundy rug. The men were bearded, and almost everyone wore long hair, beads, exotic clothing, and trinkets. The bulbs hanging from the ceiling diffused their light through Japanese paper lanterns, and Navajo God's eye symbols dangled from strings. Prabhupada began the ringing 1, 2, 3 rhythm, and Shamsundar began pumping the harmonium. Although the harmonium was a simple instrument, a miniature piano keyboard to be played with the right hand and a bellows to be pumped with the left hand, no one in the Frederick Street storefront knew how to play it, so it became simply the drone. Another important kirtan instrument, the two-headed mridanga from India, was meant for intricate rhythmic accompaniments, but even Mukunda could play it only very simply, matching the 1, 2, 3 of Prabhupada's kartals. There were other instruments on hand. A kettle drum, the pride of the temple, Hayagriva's old cornet, a few conch shells, and a horn Hayagriva had made by shellacking a piece of kelp he had found on the beach. Some guests had brought their own flutes, pipes, and bongos. But for now, they let their instruments remain still and clapped to Prabhupada's rhythm as he sang the evening prayers. Prabhupada's Sanskrit hymn praised the Vaishnava spiritual masters. For each great devotee in the disciplic succession, he sang a specific prayer. First, he chanted a poetic description of the transcendental qualities of Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati, then Gaur-Kishore Das Babaji, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, one after another. One prayer describes Srila Bhakti Siddhanta as the deliverer of the fallen souls, and another prays Gaur Kishore Das Babaji as renunciation personified, always merged in a feeling of separation and intense love for Krishna. Srila Prabhupada sang of Lord Chaitanya, the golden complexioned Supreme Personality of Godhead, who distributed pure love of Krishna. And he sang of Lord Krishna, the ocean of mercy, the friend of the distressed, the source of creation. As Prabhupada became absorbed in the bhajan, his body trembled with ecstatic emotion. The group on the floor sat swaying from side to side, watching him, his eyes closed in meditation, his delicate, practiced fingers expertly playing the cymbals. They heard the heartfelt minor moods and tones of his voice, unlike anything they had heard before. Then he began the familiar mantra they had come to hear. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. And immediately they joined him. The horns and drums sounded, and soon all the other instrument players joined in. Gradually, a few at a time, members of the audience rose to their feet and began to dance. Prabhupada's followers stood and began stepping from side to side as he had shown them, sometimes raising their hands in the air. Others moved as they pleased. Occasionally, opening his eyes and glancing around, Prabhupada sat firmly, chanting, though his head and body were trembling. After 20 minutes, many of the young dancers were leaping, jumping, and perspiring as Prabhupada continued to sing, leading the dancers by the beat of his kartals. His eyes were closed, yet he controlled the entire wild congregation, playing his kartals loudly. The chanting and dancing continued, and Prabhupada approved. The kirtan of these hippies was different from the chanting of Indian brahmanas, but Prabhupada did not mind. His standard was devotion. In his Radha Krishna temple, whatever he accepted, Krishna accepted. This was his offering to Krishna, to his spiritual master, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. Prabhupada was absolutely confident. Even if his young devotees did not know how to play the harmonium keyboard or the mridanga, even if they did not know that congregational kirtan should be done not in constant unison, as they were doing, but responsively, and even if they did not know how to honor the Guru, still, because they were chanting and dancing, he encouraged them and nodded to them, yes. So as mentioned here, the kirtan at that time, everybody was chanting together. Prabhupada is supposed to lead the kirtan, so he's supposed to lead first and then response should be given by the followers. But in the beginning of ISKCON, it was like that. Everybody chanting together. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. It's only afterwards, I forgot the exact date, that Prabhupada told them, leader chants alone, and then afterwards everybody responds together. But that came much after. So I wanted to also add something of my personal experience when Srila Prabhupada came here in November 1976, at the time of opening of this temple, Hyderabad. So as we were reading, how Prabhupada asked Nandarani to clean did a pot, big pot where they were going to boil the milk. So Prabhupada gave very strict instruction at that time to Nandarani to clean this very carefully. And as mentioned here very nicely, Nandarani is mentioning several times she had to go back to the bathroom in the bathtub and try to remove the last speck of black. So my Prabhupada here did something similar while opening this temple. From here, this temple room, he went to the kitchen. Prabhupada told them the kitchen should be even more clean than the temple. So at that time, we had actually no idea what is the standard of cleanliness that Prabhupada wanted us to adopt in the kitchen or anywhere. His standard of cleanliness was absolutely beyond our knowledge. And Prabhupada entered the kitchen. He saw some utensils gathered here and there. And he saw one big wok, round metal cooking utensil. And it appeared to be shining. Everybody was happy, smiling. Oh, Prabhupada is very happy. He's seeing the temple, the kitchen. Everybody was in ecstasy to see Prabhupada like this. So we were about half a dozen maximum, including the temple presidents, Mahamsa Swami. So Prabhupada saw everywhere like this, and then he saw this big wok on the floor. And apparently it was clean. That was our impression. Prabhupada said, "Oh, this is dirty. This is dirty. How this..." Actually, I have to mention that the wok was down up. So when we saw this, it was shining, actually. It was shining. It was all right. Then Prabhupada took it, and by the two handles, one left and the right handle, he did like this, making upside down. So when it became upside down, then the bottom, outside on the bottom, it was clearly visible. Previously, it was not visible because it was on the floor. Now Prabhupada makes it upside down. And oh, this is so dirty. There's some black because of burning, cooking. Then the black had come on the vessel. And it is very difficult to clean this. Anyway, so Prabhupada said, "Oh, this is so dirty. Make it clean. There should not be any black." Exactly like here. So I remember immediately that the standard of cleanliness of Prabhupada did not change. This was in 1967, and he came here 9 years afterwards. And the same standard of cleanliness. There are many other instructions of Prabhupada regarding cleanliness, but this was just the same. So that's why I could remember that. So anyway, now what should we do? We are not hearing Prabhupada exactly as before. We hear Prabhupada through his books, and so we should try our best to follow the same standard as what Prabhupada has told us to follow. Otherwise, if we don't follow the same standard, then level of Krishna consciousness cannot remain on the same. Cleanliness is very essential, and we should be conscious of this and remembering what Prabhupada had told us, or from the books. Now we are reading Prabhupada Lilamrita. So we should not think that this only applies to San Francisco, Nandarani at that time. We should think that this applies to today, to this temple, to everyone. All these instructions are still valid. Devotional service is eternal and should be followed in all respects as Srila Prabhupada, as the founder Acharya. Founder Acharya means whatever standard is set, that should continue. That is the meaning of founder Acharya. Anyway, Hare Krishna, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Any questions or comments? Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.